So we're going to walk through our install fest for Macs, which is going to be setting up really your development environment on your laptop. And really, your laptop is your tool and your workbench, right? And Francisco is just kind of going over the command line. And the command line and the shell in Linux is really sort of like the programmer's workbench where you have got all your different tools, like your hammers and your saws and stuff like that. And a big part of being a professional software engineer is being able to, really know how to use your tools well. And programming languages and then the computer itself are our most important tools. And your own laptop, or what we call your local dev machine, because sometimes, as we'll see, like code gets run in GitHub or when we deploy to servers, but local meaning like ourselves, like the local network, keeping this up to date and installing stuff and being able to use these professional toolings and set up a good environment for you to have a good workflow is a really important skill. So hopefully you all kind of have an Apple ID, you have the most recent operating system, and does everyone have a GitHub account created already? Can I just maybe get like a quick thumbs up from everyone who's got GitHub? Beautiful. Love it. So we're going to go over the terminal, a bit about setting up VS Code, how to install software on the Mac with what's called package management, setting up Python on the Mac, and there's one or two little ins and outs specific to Macs for this. Being able to run JavaScript on our machines with Node.js, which lets us run JavaScript outside the browser. This program Git that we'll learn more about tomorrow for version control. And we'll learn a little bit more about the command line and setting up a database called Postgres, and then a little more VS Code stuff. So Francisco kind of introduced us to the terminal already. And can someone maybe just quickly recap, like what is the terminal?
The terminal is a command line interface that you use to navigate through directories. You can run your scripts or access files. Just it's a way to navigate through your computer from the command line rather than an actual GUI.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a really useful distinction that's subtle, but just file it away. It's not super urgent, but there is a program called the shell, and then there is a program called the terminal. And this word terminal comes from way back when, in like the 70s, when the computers were big mainframes and the keyboard and the monitor was completely dumb. And it literally was a physical terminal to the main system. And by the way, if you do command space on Mac, it opens up this great finder, and this is how I open up all my programs. And because Macs are Unix-based systems now, ever since OS X came out, they have a terminal. And what a terminal does is it runs a shell program. And all this stuff that Francisco is talking about, that's the shell. And these days, a terminal program is software, but way back when it was hardware. And so you can have multiple shell sessions in the same terminal. And Mac has gotten really strict these days with permissions. So I've basically got two shell sessions running here right now. And there's a bunch of different terminal programs. The one you will use the most is in VS Code. And you can get to it you can go to the top file menu where it says terminal, and do new terminal. And I can have multiple shell sessions open in this terminal, as you can see. The keyboard command control tilde will also open and close this terminal, and that is really useful. I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into VS Code. The other program that I would just highly recommend installing and downloading, and it doesn't take very long, don't worry about getting it all set up right now, I would just go ahead and download it, is iTerm. And it's a terminal program, and I have it, and I love it, and this is usually what I use when I have to do stuff on the terminal. Because sometimes, and I full screened all this stuff just for presentation purposes, but sometimes it's just easier to have a terminal program rather than use the VS Code built-in terminal. And I can do nice stuff like splits, and there's color profiles, an iTerm has a search feature, and just all this nice stuff. So let me go ahead and share that link. You don't have to use this. It's not critical to the class. Honestly, you'll probably spend most of the time in the VS Code terminal, but just so you're aware, I wanted to go ahead and share that. So we've got the terminal, and then the terminal runs a shell program. There's a couple different shell programs. The default one for a lot of stuff is one called Bash that's been around for ages. All of these names are sort of too clever for their own good. Bash stands for Born Again Shell. There's another shell called ZSH that I don't know what the Z stands for, to be honest, but the SH definitely stands for shell. And Macs now come with ZSH as its default shell. So, and the reason that ZSH has become pretty popular is this set of sort of plugins for ZSH called Oh My ZSH that is super useful, that just has a lot of nice stuff installed for us. It installs plugins for a bunch of different things. If we go look at it, we can kind of see what it does. I won't go into too much depth on it today, but it includes nice color themes. It includes keyboard shortcuts. It includes useful search features on the command line. There's a whole plugin ecosystem. And then this command, which is also in the curriculum, is how you install it. And without going into too much detail, what this command is doing is it's like opening up another shell using this program curl to make a request to a URL, a link, and get a file from the internet, this shell script install.sh, and run it. And just go ahead, please, and do go ahead and run that. And let me go ahead and exit this and bump the font size up a bit. And it doesn't matter where you run this. I'll just run it here now. And I already have installed it, so I don't really have to do that much, but it'll prompt you for a couple of things, and just go ahead and kind of click through for a default installation. And while folks are doing this, how are people doing? And do folks have any questions?
I got one question. I know there's been videos about install fest now. I think there was one earlier, and then there was another video saved. Is there sort of commands that we can run, like where you put like TAC-V after certain things, just to check through the different programs and installations to check just version numbers while we're going through this, instead of rewriting what some people may have already set up?
You mean like basically not doing a reinstall of something that you've already installed from going through InstallFest?
No. Like if someone already went through InstallFest, instead of running these commands again, that might overwrite something. Is there a way to check like version numbers on each of these steps, or no?
Most of these have ways to check version numbers. That is a really good point. As you can see with this specific command, there's not a lot of harm in running the ZSH installer. Again, I kind of figured out I already have it installed and didn't do anything, which will be true of most of these things. But if you already know that you have something set up, yes, then feel more than free to skip this. Like, for instance, if you already have Oh My ZSH set up, then there is no need to run that step. Similarly, if you've got Python properly set up, there's no need to do that stuff, or same with Postgres. I wouldn't even worry about version numbers, because if you know you've got it installed, then why do it? Does that make sense? Did I kind of understand what you were saying?
Yeah, I just wanted a way to validate that after following like your guys' tutorial video, that the stuff
Got
was.
it, for sure. Yeah, how many folks already have like Oh My ZSH installed, by the way? Okay, almost everyone. Awesome. So we can probably move through most of this pretty quickly, which is great. And that's kind of the goal for today too. So kind of running down this list, just to demonstrate, there is now a config file for our shell, and I'll talk about it more in a bit. But if you navigate to your home directory, which you can do just by typing CD and hitting enter, or CD space tilde, which is a shortcut to the home directory, you can hit pwd, you can see I'm in my home directory. If I type ls, I see a bunch of files. If I type ls space -a, which shows us files starting with a dot, which are called dot files. Hiding in here, I have a ZSH RC config file. And we're going to add some stuff there in a minute. But this file gets run every time you create a new shell session. And in fact, I could go ahead and look at this if I wanted. And we can see some stuff in here that we're going to add. And I'll kind of walk through this with VS Code in a minute. Okay, awesome. So how many people, I assume most folks have VS Code installed as well. Can I get a thumbs up from everyone that has VS Code installed? Beautiful. How about running VS Code from the command line? If I want to do, let's actually just go ahead and follow along with me here. If you're not in your home directory, go ahead and navigate to it and now do code.zshrc to open up that ZSHRC shell config file in VS Code. How many folks have that step set up where I can open files from the command line with VS Code? Cool. Some people do, some people don't. That's why we're doing this. And the good news is this step is super straightforward. I have to remind myself. Oh yeah, Command-Shift-P. And so this is actually a good time to talk about the VS Code command palette. So modern editors have a pretty cool feature that you almost always want to use with a keyboard shortcut called the command palette. So on a Mac with VS Code, this is Command-Shift-P. And this opens up a bunch of different commands for all sorts of things that you can do. And it's got autocomplete as you type. So if you type shell command and install, one of the options should be install code command and path. You can click on it with the mouse. You can use the up arrow and the down arrow. You can use Control N and Control P to move up and down, which are old school keyboard shortcuts because they're a little closer to where the hands are. And just go ahead and run this command. If it's already done, it won't hurt to do it again. If you can't run code, VS Code from the command line, then that should do it. And now you should be able to, from the command line, do code ZSHRC. You might have to quit and restart your VS Code. I'm not 100%. And let me just pause and see if folks have any questions.
I did have a quick question, Adam.
Yes, sir.
As far as like all the plugins with LMIZSH, would you recommend not using them? Like, could they become a crutch, or would you say no? If it makes you more efficient, use them.
Definitely not a crutch. Great question. If it makes you more efficient, use them. It's like, you know, people used to trick out their cars, and now you can't really do that with cars anymore. And programmers, not all, I know a lot of amazing software engineers that don't go deep into the command line stuff, especially if you're working in like the Windows ecosystem with like the C# language and .NET. But a lot of folks love to trick out their command line, and our job is to make the computer do the work. Our job is to understand what it does, but our job is to make the computer do the work. The joke is that like a good programmer is lazy, and that's not because we're lazy, but because we don't want to do manual repetitive stuff. That's what computers are for. So I have not gone super deep into ZSH, to be honest. I used to be more deep into the command line when I was like using Vim in the terminal for my editing. And I mean, I haven't been doing professional software development for like a bit, but there's a lot of really useful things you can do. Just the default Oh My ZSH has some great stuff. But just to kind of show you guys, first of all, this isn't even a ZSH thing, but if you hit the up arrow and the down arrow on the command line, it moves through the history of all your commands, which actually you can see by typing history. If you hit Control R, that does a search through all your commands. And then if you do, I think it's like Control, let's see here. I think there's some, I don't remember the command to then search through the search results, but you can actually search through stuff. There's a great fuzzy finder for finding stuff on the file system called FZF. You can put command prompt stuff on here. I would go to town with whatever, as deep as you want to go. It's only going to help. Yeah, great question. Other questions, things on people's minds?
Wait, can you go over how you do the ZSHRC again? Like, what do you gotta press on up top?
Yeah, totally. So we're not going to mess with it right now, but in any terminal, just type cd and hit enter. And it's a nice little shortcut. You don't need to, that'll take you right to your home directory. If you hit pwd, you can see that you're in your home directory. The command line program code will now use VS Code to open whatever file path you pointed to. And because we're in the home directory, which is where this .zshrc file lives, we are going to now open up this file, which just happens to start with a dot. The convention is files that start with dot have like configuration stuff, and they're called dot files. And that opens it up in VS Code. And you can close it like that. I hit the up arrow, I've got my command back. Another great command line trick is if you hit tab, it auto completes stuff, which I use all the time because I make a ton of typos. And it's also a nice trick to make sure you're in the right spot, because if you don't see what you're expecting, that tells you you're in the wrong directory. So I highly recommend making tab and the up arrow and down arrow and control R your best friend on the command line. We're not going to do anything with this file right now, but we'll come back to it in a bit. With VS Code, the command palette with Command Shift P is really important to get used to. You can use it to create new files. Every extension that you can install, you can do stuff with. Command P without the shift will search through files by name, which is super useful. And when you have a project open, Command Shift F will do a full text search through all the files in your directory. So there's a lot of really powerful keyboard shortcuts that VS Code gives us. So we've all got VS Code set up, and we can all open files from the command line with it, correct?
I'm having an issue with that, Adam. Brett mentioned it in the comments.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, what's the issue?
It's sending an error. Permission denied on link user local bin code.
I see. Did you get like a Mac system pop-up permission for something? Or did you get any sort of pop-up warning when you did that VS Code shell sort of thing? And you may not have.
I'm just getting that error.
Okay. Let's see what the internet says real quick. So okay. We'll come back to that. Let me share this with you guys. If one of you could repost it in Slack, actually, just for memory purposes, that would be great. Actually, let me just.
Not to interject, but I just did what that page said real quick and uninstalled and then reinstalled it and it worked fine.
And it worked. That was going to be the next thing I was going to say. Okay.
I tried it last night and it worked, so I'm thinking maybe it won't let you install it more than once.
That is not the issue. It might just, Mac has gone stricter with permissions. I've been reinstalling this a whole bunch of times. So it might just be a timing thing, or I honestly don't know what. But yeah, try uninstalling and reinstalling, quit VS Code, reopen it, see if it works. If it doesn't, remind me and we'll come back to it at the end of the lesson. And thanks for reminding me to keep an eye on the comments in the chat. Cool. Any other questions before we move on to the package managers? Okay, awesome. I'll talk a bit more about VS Code later. Microsoft has some really good tutorials that you want to make your editor your best friend. It will take a little work, but it'll make your life way easier. So again, these are the tools that help us enter into the professional world, because these are just kind of the norms of how to set up and configure this stuff. And this is really like the keys to the kingdom. Let me get a quick thumbs up. How many people already installed Homebrew or Brew on their Macs? So a lot of folks, but not everyone. Okay, awesome. Let me walk through this real quick. And can someone actually maybe tell me what is Homebrew? Why do we want to install it? What good does it do us?
It's just like a package manager, so that like if you can't like go online yourself and like use a browser in your GUI to like download packages and stuff like that, Homebrew will download it directly to your computer and configure it through the CLI.
Yeah, exactly. Package managers are really common, and how in the software world most stuff gets installed. Brew is the package manager for Mac for installing all sorts of programs. You can actually, if you really want to, install like I think Firefox or VS Code with it. And you can search through to see, what's in here. Like if I search through NPM for JavaScript, it's going to be in there. Or if I search for, I don't know, VS Code. Or maybe let's search for Python. Right, if we wanted to install Python, which is what we're going to do in a minute. Most, like Linux has a bunch of package managers. The one for Linux is called apt, APT, and each programming language usually has its own package manager that's popular, sometimes a couple. And we'll look at the ones for Python and Node.js, JavaScript in a minute. And again, the command line is really, and text is sort of like the common lingua franca for all this stuff. So if you don't have Homebrew installed, please go ahead and install it. And the command for installing it should be, it is both in our curriculum material and also on the page here. And they give a very nice, useful button to click so you can copy the thing whole. So just make sure you've grabbed the whole thing. Can anyone tell me, how can I double check that I have Homebrew installed already? How can I know if I have it installed or not?
Brew Doctor.
Well, what does Brew Doctor do?
It attempts to run.
Yeah, so on the command line, the first statement is almost always the name of a program. In fact, we can use this command called which to see where that program lives. And then these next ones are arguments, like function arguments to tell that program to do different things. Brew Doctor tells Homebrew to look at the packages it's installed and look for sort of common issues to fix. And certainly if we run that, it'll tell us if Homebrew is installed or not. Is there another way that, because Brew Doctor, if I have a lot of packages installed, it might take a while. Are there other ways that I can check that Homebrew is installed without running the Doctor command?
Just do brew update.
Brew version.
Brew update, right? That will also update stuff. And that'll tell us as well. And brew version is a little closer to what I'm thinking, because all that does is tell us the particular version of Homebrew that we have. So brew update will certainly work as well, but it might update a bunch of stuff. So just generally speaking, like whatever the program name is, space -- version will give us the version of that program. And especially if you're writing, say, a shell script, that's a really safe and easy way to check that something is installed without side effects. If I just type brew and hit enter, I'll get all this command prompt stuff as well. So please do go ahead and install Homebrew with this command that I shared in the Zoom channel if you haven't. And if you haven't, go ahead and run Brew Doctor. And I'm probably going to kill mine as soon as it starts, because sometimes it takes a long time. So actually, it went pretty fast here. This is going to spit out a whole bunch of stuff. All these programs on the command line spit out a whole bunch of stuff. The rule of thumb is usually you start at the very top or the very bottom and ignore everything else. And as we get deeper and deeper into programming, you're going to see lots of warnings. You can usually ignore warnings. So I'm just going to ignore these warnings right now. And also what often happens is sometimes like dealing with the warning is not a straightforward like one-step operation. So I'm not even going to worry about this. A warning doesn't mean that something is broken, and a warning is different from an error. So let me just pause and see if folks have questions about Homebrew or kind of any of the stuff that we were going over. Okay, cool. I know this is review for some folks. Hopefully there are some useful tidbits here along the way as well. How's everyone doing? Awesome. And we're just cruising through InstallFest. I love it. Let me go to our doc and we'll just kind of continue down the next slide. So we've got package management for our operating system. You do indeed want to run Brew Doctor to fix stuff. We are now going to look at this shell config file. So do go ahead and run this command. And can someone remind me, what does this / here mean in this command?
It's starting from the root directory.
Yeah, exactly. So do I need to run this command in any particular directory to open this ZSHRC config file? For instance, I'm in this directory CLI practice right now. What is this command code space tilde dash dot ZSHRC telling my computer to do?
Did it go into the root folder? So it's a absolute command instead of relative.
Close. The tilde is actually, it's not an absolute path. You're thinking of if it looked something like this with just the dash.
Gotcha.
And yeah, this is sort of arcane stuff. So it's a very easy point of confusion. The tilde is short for the home directory. It's like a shortcut or an alias. By the way, another useful shortcut is dash takes you back to whatever directory you were last at. So I can hop back and forth between directories really quickly with dash. So this command code tilde / is saying VS Code, look at my home directory and open this file there. So it's not like a full, you're absolutely right. It's not like a full on relative path. It's sort of this alias. And someone's got a hot mic. Let me, oh, awesome. Thank you, whoever hopped on the hot mic. So go ahead and open up your ZSHRC file. And we're going to kind of explore just a little bit of what's inside here. So we're going to add a couple things. Go ahead and add this line of code. I don't want to go too deep into it right now, but the shell has variables, and by convention, they're all caps. And there's a special variable called path. And when we want to access a variable from the shell, we use a $sign. For instance, if I go to my terminal, I could do foo equals hello world. And then I could do, so echo is sort of the shell version of print, the print command. This does nothing. This accesses my variable. And every time you start a shell session, it has this variable called path that the shell uses to find programs when you tell them to run it from the command line. So I have already updated my ZSHRC to have this. And in fact, many of you may have this already, but if you haven't, please just go ahead and add this. And it just adds to the path another place for our shell to look for stuff. And I'm going to delete this one because I have it on the line above, but if it's not in your ZSHRC file, you should add this there. In fact, this line might be commented out, and if you just uncomment that, that will do the exact same thing. So I just want to pause and check in and see if folks have any questions. And also, I'm curious, did some folks already tackle this and set this up? Okay, awesome. A good number of people. So thank you for being patient with me and with the review and walkthrough. And again, hopefully there are some useful tidbits along the way. And so the ZSHRC file is where you can really customize your shell. And someone was asking about the plugins and stuff. And this is where you would kind of like add all the stuff that you want. Whenever you change it, you either will need to close the shell that you're currently in or run this command source, which reloads the config file. Every time you open up a shell session, it runs whatever is in that ZSHRC file. So there's a new shell session, just ran the ZSHRC file. For instance, if I modify my ZSHRC file, export, and by the way, in this new session, that foo environment variable is gone, right? Because I created it within the shell session that was running. But if I do foo equals hello world, well, it's not there. But if I do source to reload this file, and actually, before I do that, let me just go ahead and create a new shell session to demo this. Now it's there because the new shell session ran the config file. In this other one that I already had open, nothing. But if I reload my config file, now it's there. So you're not going to have to do a ton with that, but I just wanted to demonstrate what's going on there a little bit. And actually, let me see if folks have any questions. Cool. Okay, we're digging a little bit under the hood into the shell. I don't want to go too deep right now, but just to kind of show some of that stuff. So Python. Let me get a quick thumbs up or hands up from everyone who's done the InstallFest Python stuff. Okay, so I think pretty much everyone. Can someone maybe give a summary of why we had to install Python again, since it was already installed on our Mac? And this, we may not have covered this. So if this is a good thing to talk on, then we totally will.
I'll take a stab at it. I think it was because it was like Python 3, maybe a version control of Python.
Yeah, exactly. So Python 3 came out, I don't know how many years ago, a decent number of years ago, but it was a long time. And before that, there was Python 2. Python is used everywhere. It's a really popular language for shell scripting, for scientific computing, for backend web app stuff, for number crunching and stats and stuff related to machine learning. Python 3 was a major version change, right? Not like a minor version change from 2.5 to 2.6, but from version 2 to version 3. Very often when you have a major version change with a programming language or framework, there's what's called breaking changes, where all of a sudden a command or something that worked just fine with Python version 2 does not work with Python version 3. It breaks. So that's a big deal whenever you have to like upgrade major versions with a piece of software. So for maintainability and backwards compatibility purposes, they kept the name Python for Python 2. So all the old Python 2 stuff would still run. But Python 3, we then need to alias so we can make our lives a little easier. So everyone should have installed Python, and this will just install Python 3 by default. And if you do brew info Python, should tell us what version of Python we have installed. It should tell us if it's installed or not. And indeed it has been. So as most of you discovered, when Python was first installed, if I wanted to run a Python program or open up the Python REPL to be able to run like Python commands immediately, sort of interactively in the browser, I would have to type Python 3. But we are going to make what's called an alias, which is a feature of the shell. So I don't have to type Python 3 all the time. And here we're going to go back to this ZSHRC config file. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, there is this command. So to create an alias. So when I type Python, the shell knows that's really like shorthand for Python 3. And same with pip, which is the Python package manager. So I don't have to type Python 3 and pip 3 all the time. So can I get a quick hands up from everyone who has added this to their ZSHRC shell config? Awesome. And if you haven't, please go ahead and do this now. And if you need me to paste that into the Zoom chat, just let me know. And yeah, do folks have any questions?
So I see on the install fest like instructions, it's like you can type which Python to see which version, but mine, when I typed in, it didn't really say anything. It just went down to the next line.
You don't see Python alias to Python 3?
Nope. It just went to line 108.
Line 108.
Just the next line for me.
Can you quickly share your screen?
Sure.
Yeah, I may circle back to this one later, if it's not a quick fix. And there may be a good like learning moment here.
Okay. Geez, it said that I might not be able to record the contents of my screen until it is quit.
That's fine. Let's come back to it later. What
Yeah.
I would say is I'm a little surprised to hear line 108. I would make sure that you're in a terminal, not like in a source code file or in the Python REPL. Maybe just open up a new terminal like this, and then just type like which ls, and it should say like alias to ls-g, or if you do like which cd, it'll say built-in command. Just make sure you're in a shell session, and then try which Python and see what it says. You know, if you do that and it says line 108, there may be a typo in your ZSHRC config file, and that would be the next thing to check. Hit me up once we wrap up and we can take a look, but I would maybe double check what you wrote in the ZSHRC to see if there's an issue there, and if line 108 happens to be the same line in the ZSHRC where you have that alias statement.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. Actually, that is probably the issue if I had to bet $1. It's very easy, I think, to get a typo wrong, and shell config error messages are kind of arcane. Okay, so this is awesome. So we've all got Python installed. We should all have pip installed. If you haven't, please run this command python 3-m ensure pip. And go ahead and just type pip 3. And again, can I get just a quick thumbs up from everyone that's got that set up? Awesome. So a really good habit to get into as we get further into the course, both with JavaScript and Node.js, is whenever you install a new library, look it up and give it like a quick 5-minute read. This is sort of the official pip website, and you can find like the repositories of all the Python modules or packages out there. And we're going to learn about the Django web framework later. The things to look at, basically, you want to use popular packages for most things, because the more eyes on code, it means people have found bugs, found the edge cases, worked it out, that this is like solid, reliable, stable code. Seeing the latest version when it was released is useful. Then you can, go to the homepage if you want to look at their documentation. Looking at the GitHub statistics is a useful one as well to get a sense of how popular a certain library is. Let's bring this one over here. So as sort of mentioned here, Python uses a virtual environment to install stuff. The reason being, I might be working on multiple different Python projects, and maybe I'm doing consulting work for clients, and one client has an older application that's using Django version 3. Another one is using Django version 5. So dependency management, what libraries my program depends on and what versions of those libraries is a big deal. And different programming languages have different ways of dealing with that. Python has something called a virtual environment that we'll talk about more when we get into it. For the moment, we are just going to create a default virtual environment. And let me get a quick thumbs up from everyone that has done this step. Cool. So some people, yes, some people no. Can someone maybe talk us through line by line? What is each of these commands on this line doing? Someone who ran this and set this up. So let me talk through this. Oh, please. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, I don't really like fully understand it, but from basics, basically it's kind of setting up like a server to run your Python through.
Not quite.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have the right idea about sort of containing stuff. A server is sort of a different kind of beast. It's like a program for like listening for HTTP requests from browsers and things like that. We're going to use this though to build like backend web server apps with Python. A Python virtual environment is a lot fancier than it sounds. It's actually way simpler. All it is a directory. And don't worry about this command that I'm typing right now. I'm just doing this because I already created this, so I can do this from scratch. So this command, and we don't need the Python 3 because we have the alias, right? Let me walk through this command. What we're saying here is shell, run the Python program. The -m means module, which is we're saying Python, look for some other Python program that's installed. And by default, there's one called venv, which is short for virtual environment. And then we're telling this Python virtual environment program, create a new virtual environment named default, right? Because if I had written, a Python file with something in it, I could run it like this, foo.py -m. It's the same thing, but we're saying, hey, this is something that we have installed with pip. Look for this Python program and run it and create a virtual environment named default. And go ahead and run this command now if you have not. And you should do this in your home directory. I apologize for not saying that. And if you did it somewhere outside of your home directory, it's not a big deal. You could just delete it creates a directory named default. I'm not gonna, this command, it's just a nice little search for stuff command. ls lists everything. This vertical line pipes the output of ls into this filtering program called grep that then returns only the lines that have this string that we're searching for. So this is a nice little command to write down in a file or a piece of paper somewhere to check if something's installed. And indeed, if I go into the default directory, there's all this stuff there. But that's what that Python -m them default command does. It creates this directory named default. So like I'll delete it. Now if I run this again, there's nothing there. Now I've just created it again. So a Python virtual environment, first off, it's just a directory. And then when we use pip, we're going to install stuff in it. We do have to tell our shell that we want to use this directory to install things with pip. And the way that we do that is what Python calls activating the virtual environment. And inside that default directory, there's a directory named bin, which is short for binary. And then there's a shell script there named activate. And now if I install something like there's a little web server called Flask that we'll learn about later, it gets installed inside that default directory. And any Python code I write that's going to use this Flask program will look for it there. And I can see right here on my command prompt that this default virtual environment is activated. Nothing else is affected. Node.js works fine. Git works fine. The virtual environment isn't like a virtual machine. It's just doing a little bit of stuff with like the shell's path variable. And it's sort of created this little script deactivate that I can use to then turn off the virtual environment if I wanted to install stuff somewhere else. And I can just turn it back on. So let me pause here real quick and see if folks have any questions. We don't have to go. Yeah, what's up?
I'm sorry, I got a quick question. I was dabbling with Python like a couple years ago, and we used the Anaconda. Is that kind of essentially the same thing for like managing environments and things like that?
Probably. That sounds about right. I have most of my professional work was with JavaScript or other languages, so I don't have a super deep knowledge, but yeah, I think Anaconda is like another package manager, another tool out there. There's a bunch of different options with Python.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And if there is a different approach that you prefer, go for it. Just know that it's sort of like roll your own. This is the one that we kind of can know and support. So what we're going to do a bit later is, well, actually, we can go ahead and do this now, is let's just open up our ZSHRC file. And it doesn't matter if the Python environment, virtual environment is activated or deactivated or not. And down at the very bottom of it, right, I'm up here, down at the bottom, add this line to activate the Python virtual environment. And the shell environment variable, home, is our home directory. And the shell creates that for us for free. So we get that for free. So just like from my home directory, I was doing source relative path default bin activate. The home command lets us run this from anywhere, because this is a variable that gives us the full absolute path to our home directory. And so we can like compose the path here. And what we're doing here is we're turning on our default Python virtual environment every time we open up a new shell, because for like the first 6 or 7 weeks of the class, you don't need multiple virtual environments. And it's just easier whenever you install like a Python dependency for a testing library or whatever to have it all go in one spot. And I just want to pause and check in and see if folks have any questions about stuff. Yeah,
I do, Adam. This might be too complicated of an answer for what we're doing right now, but I was just wondering if we weren't using like ohmyzsh and didn't have the .zshrc file, how would you go about like creating the path for Homebrew, and then also like what we're doing for Python?
Great question. Every shell program out there has its own config file. If we were using the bash shell instead of ZSHRC, we would be able to look at, I think it's just like, in fact, I think I might still have a bash script file. But like for the bash shell, it would just be bash RC. I think most of these have the RC in it by convention. I actually don't know what it stands for. You're always going to be having some sort of shell program, and that shell program will have a config file that is almost always a dot file that's like bash underscore profile or bash RC. Yeah, great question, Tyler.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because you're absolutely correct. We really do need that config file to do anything interesting with our shell. Yeah, other questions, stuff on people's minds before we keep on rolling.
Yeah, just real quick, Adam, I had a question for this config file. Like if I were editing that in Nano, I'd have to save the file, but in VS Code, it seems like you don't have to save. Is it just automatically written?
Great question. You definitely have to save the file. I have been using Vim for a while, and so I have the Vim mode on, which you can sort of tell like by the way this cursor changes. And so by habit, you can sort of see it hiding away down here where it says normal. If I do like the W to write, I'm saving the file. So I save like every 5 seconds out of habit. There is a way in VS Code to autosave. In fact, if you do Command Shift P and you type autosave, there is an option that will automatically save the file like every second or something like that. And actually, that's a great one to turn on. There's not really a downside. When I'm developing, sometimes I have a workflow where like every time I save the file, I rerun some tests or something, and that's why I like to control it manually. But I recommend toggling autosave to on. It will probably make your life easier.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely. Great question. Yeah, other questions, things on people's minds?
Can you explain how that source $home was working? Are you saying that putting that in the CHRC is just like now a shortcut command that we can use to activate the Python virtual environment?
Yeah, exactly. Every time you start a new shell session, whether from opening up a terminal or in VS Code hitting this plus, or in VS Code, you can actually also split the terminal, which is super useful. Whatever you create a new shell session, it runs this CSHRC config file. And this command here says source means basically read this file and execute it. $home is a shell variable pointing to our home directory. And /default is the directory of the Python virtual environment directory that we created. And inside there is this activate script. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, great question. The shell stuff is a little arcane. It's really valuable to learn, but we're already going a bit deeper really than you need for like probably the next 4 or 5 weeks. I just like to dig into to get under the hood at least a little bit. And my rule of thumb, by the way, is I think of stuff as like level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is like, I just want to know it exists. So if I need to learn more about it, I can. Level 2 is kind of what we're doing with the shell, like digging into it a bit more. Level 3 is like really in-depth knowledge. And there's so much stuff to learn that I think it is useful to be deliberate and like, all right, how much do I actually need to know to get stuff done? So that's really all the Python stuff. And I want to move on to Node.js and JavaScript, unless folks have any questions.
Yeah, Adam, how do you get out of the default environment in the terminal?
Great question. Just type deactivate and hit enter. And that deactivate script actually lives in the virtual environment directory. When we run the activate script, it creates a little pointer to it, a little alias that points to it. You can leave the virtual environment on, by the way. It really doesn't affect anything else at all other than Python stuff. So it's perfectly safe. So that's why we have it turned on by default with that command in the CSHRC. But yeah, if you just type deactivate, that'll get rid of it.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering because when I type in the code, ZSRC would open an empty file instead.
Remind me and show me that later.
Okay.
Awesome. So each language ecosystem has its own package manager. With Python, we have to jump through a couple hoops. There's Python version 3, We don't want to use the default version of Python installed on Mac. And then JavaScript also has a couple hoops where, first of all, for the longest time, you could only run JavaScript inside the browser. And then one day someone thought around like 2010, JavaScript is kind of useful for certain things. And Google has written this amazing JavaScript engine called V8 for Chrome that's super fast. What if I took that JavaScript engine, wrapped it with some C code so it could like talk to Linux and the Linux operating system in the shell, and we ran JavaScript on the command line? And that became node.js, because the idea was to write like programs that are sort of like a central node or hub. So we're going to use Homebrew to install npm, which is the node package manager. Python had pip. Node.js has npm. And so when you're looking at a JavaScript package you might install through npm, look at the weekly downloads. You want to see a lot. You know, React.js, which we'll learn about later, it's 22 million weekly downloads. That tells us this is a popular package. Let me get a quick thumbs up. How many folks have Node.js installed and have confirmed it works by like running a JavaScript program on the command line? Awesome. So I see one or two folks I think have to install it. And the good news is that this is pretty straightforward. All we have to do is run brew install npm. And if you've got it installed, it won't hurt to run it again. It'll just reinstall the same version. It'll update. It's doing something. You know, if you have it installed, honestly, you probably shouldn't worry about it. And don't run npm command. It looks like I'm getting my version of npm upgraded. The Node.js stuff is a little finicky, so hopefully it's not messing with anything, but I doubt it is. So again, if you don't have Node.js on your machine, please run brew install npm. If you're not sure, if you node space -- version, you'll see if you have it installed or not. If you already have it installed, don't worry about it. You know, I can't remember who said it earlier about making sure not to double install stuff, but that was a good point with Homebrew, because it is now doing all this stuff, though honestly, I'm not sure why it's installing all these other things at the moment. I think this is my Homebrew updating itself, because I probably don't update it enough, because I kind of like the philosophy of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I might kill this in just a moment. Like you can see, it says like installing Python version 3.2, like installing Ansible. In fact, I am going to kill it right now. So I can type node -- version. Let's see that it works. npm node packager -- version. I can see that that works. If I just type plain old node, it opens what's called the read evaluate print loop for JavaScript. And I can do like console log hello. I can control C to send that signal to quit. And the next thing you do want to do is install a program called N. And if we look up N on npm, N is the node version manager to manage different versions of Node.js. 700,000 weekly installs. That's a pretty good number. If I was doing this for real for the first time, I would like take 10 minutes to look at their GitHub and the install steps and stuff like that. But I'm not, and you all don't have to worry about that, because this is a pretty popular tool that's been around for a long time, and it's sort of being vetted by us. So we're going to go ahead and install this, because this helps us manage the different versions of Node.js, which we shouldn't have to mess with much in the class. But every now and then you might need to, and that can get a little funky. And the Node.js stuff works differently than Python, where you can have a different version of Python per virtual environment. But here you kind of need this N tool to change the version of Node that we're using. So if you haven't, go ahead and run this command. Because it's got a sudo to run this as the root user, you'll have to type your password and just go ahead and hit enter. And so we're saying operating system, use super administrator root user level permissions to run the node package manager to have it install and then -G means globally. So npm by default creates its own sort of global directory for dependencies in our home directory, sort of like the default one that we created for pip, and install this node version manager. And once you do that, you should be able to just type n, and it will show you the different versions of Node.js that you have installed. You very well may not have as many than I do. And as long as you have like 20 or above here, you're fine. And then we can tell it to use the currently supported and stable version with sudo and stable. And so I would just go ahead and run that command if you haven't. And again, just kind of confirm if you do node -- version, you should see a version number here. And if you've got that, then you're good to go. So I just want to pause and see what questions folks have or what's on people's minds.
I'm getting the install to go, and then it when I run n like tac v to get the version, it's showing up as command not found.
Yeah, that just n by, I was actually wrong. This does not. Oh, it looks like n does have a version. If you do node -- version, what do you get?
I get 21.6.1.
And if you do npm -- version, what do you get?
I get 10.2.4.
And if you just type n and hit enter, what do you get?
No command found.
Got it. Okay. I think you need to run sudo npm install -gn and hit enter and probably type your password. For whatever reason, the n node package did not install. Not a deal breaker because you already have node and npm installed. Brett, what do you mean? I see in the chat your terminal and Visual Studio Code is broken.
Yeah, I can't get it to do anything anymore. When I type in like the install, and it just doesn't do anything. It's like not even accepting inputs. I might just have to meet with you like on break or something and
yeah,
get some one-on-one.
Sounds good. It's a deal. I was gonna say you can try Control-C in the terminal. Honestly, what I would just do is I would just force quit VS Code and reopen it and see if it works.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I did something. I don't know what I did because I actually did everything yesterday, last night. Then today I was following along, trying to see what's going on. Then I just have a lot of stuff, and my terminal is broken as well. So yeah, just send command is not found. There's a bunch of them. So yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna maybe schedule something later.
Yeah, mine's like, yeah, my terminal, it's spitting out just like a constant stream of like homebrew, like install, like initialize, new, run system command, curl with workarounds, curl. And it's just going over and over and over and over and over.
Okay, it sounds like Homebrew might be installing stuff. I would just Control-C kill everything that you can. For now, close out VS Code, close out any open terminals, and just open up the plain Mac terminal for simplicity.
Yeah.
Just terminal like this. And that should work fine for the rest of the stuff that we're walking through. Hopefully you won't run into any issues, but if you do, let me know and we'll circle back to them later. And thank you both for giving me the heads up about that. And are any other folks having system environment issues at the moment? Okay, cool. So we have a couple more things I want to get through. We've got GitHub, a little bit about aliases that we actually set this up already, I think. And then installing Postgres. Postgres can be a little tricky. I think we have been rolling for a bit over an hour now, though. So how are folks feeling about like a short 10-minute break? And then continuing on. Cool. And can I get maybe just a little feedback too around the pace? Is this mostly review but useful, like, or just kind of ground that folks have covered already, or useful stuff? Whether it's just if you want to throw a comment in the chat or use some sort of emoji, you know, like sunny, cloudy, or thumbs up, thumbs down to sort of like indicate how you're doing and feeling. Okay, awesome. Thank you, folks. Let's go ahead and take 10. Let me go ahead and pause the recording. All right, we are going to continue InstallFest with Git. So Git is a version control management tool that we're going to learn a lot more later. The easiest way to check if Git is installed is just go ahead and in your terminal of choice, just type Git and see if you get anything. Or if you want to, you can type git -- version. Or if you want to, you can type which Git to see where it's installed. And this is, I believe, the version of Git that came installed on my Mac. Notice that it's not in the directory that Homebrew installs stuff in. Though actually that one is there as well, which is, yeah, so actually I take that back. I'm probably getting myself a little confused. Let me get a quick thumbs up or hands up from everyone who has Git installed. Cool. Does anyone not have Git installed? And if you don't, it should be a relatively straightforward install with Homebrew with just brew install Git. So please do go ahead and run that command. And it should then spit out a bunch of stuff as it is installing it. If I type brew info Git, it'll tell me. And in fact, I don't have it installed. I'm pretty sure it is installed on every Mac by default, but don't quote me on that. So what we are going to do now is we are going to do some configuration of Git globally. We'll learn a bit more about Git later because there is sort of a different .git directory for every Git repo that we make on our computer and for every project. But the same way we're learning about global configs for all sorts of things, this Git program we can configure globally as well. And ls-a prints out all the different files in a directory, including the files and directories that start with the dot. So if you navigate to your home directory with cd or just cd tilde, and you do ls -a, and you look through here, you'll see all these dot files. And hiding in here is a directory named .gitconfig. By the way, if you want to, you can type the output of ls into another program called less that lets you paginate with spacebar. And then you can hit Q to quit. That's a super useful thing. That's usually how I am using ls for all sorts of stuff. And the -a for the ls command shows us the dot files. Or we could also ls-a and filter for anything that has Git in it. And so there's this git config directory, and I'm not going to dig into it, but this is where our Git global config stuff lives. For different kinds of programs or tools, there are different ways we're supposed to configure them. And you always want to read a bit about how the program wants you to do it, because sometimes there's stuff going on under the hood. So with Git, although if we go into that git config directory, we can actually find a file where this information lives, it wants us to use a config command because maybe it's doing one or two other things. And it's just always a good idea to change stuff like this the way that the README and the docs tell you to, because you never know if there's some magic happening under the hood. So go ahead and we want to first set this global default to our username if we haven't. So my GitHub username is AdamC, CEE. And in fact, we can look at our global config with this command, git config space dash dash global dash L. And let's go ahead and do that actually. And so go ahead and run this command. And note that this actually opens this up in that less program that paginates. We see that same end here. You should see user.email being something, user.name being something. This is actually your real name, not your GitHub username. I apologize, I got confused there. A default name for the branch. The convention used to be the default branch name was master. That got changed to main, and now most places and most companies use main as their default branch. And the default editor for opening up Git related stuff like commit messages that we'll learn about later. So quick sanity check, and then you can hit Q to quit. So a quick sanity check, everyone is able to run that command and see some sort of config information, correct? Is anybody not able to do that or running into an issue? Okay, awesome. Let me get a quick hands up from anyone who like that email is not what it should be, or the default editor does not say code space dash dash wait. So let me see a thumbs up if the email is not your right email, or the editor is not code space dash dash wait. Okay, awesome. Good news is we're going to change it, and it's super straightforward. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these commands in here. And actually, I need to. And actually, let me quickly send this to Francisco. I think he's probably tracking, but I remember fix git config use this. Thanks for being patient with me here, folks. Okay, sorry about that. So back to our install fest stuff. And thanks for being patient with me as I'm jumping around a bit here.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah, what's up?
Sorry to bother you. If my editor, the last line of the config says equals code, but without the dash dash wait, is that a big deal?
I think so, yes. I remember messing around with this.
That's what mine says as well. I'm pretty sure that means that it's going to automatically push updates.
Yeah, I don't think we want that, to be honest. I think that was a goof on our end. I remember playing around with this. Let me confirm that this is what I have. Let me do a sanity check. Yeah, I've got the wait. That's what we want. Because the deal is like, let me just get into a Git repo really fast here. The deal is we'll learn about commits in a bit, but what we want to have happen is I want to be able to edit my git commit message here in VS Code and then save it. And then when it's saved, like be able to then push it up. So please do add the dash dash wait. I think that is correct. So you should be able to do that pretty straightforwardly by just running this command to update the git global config. Go ahead to and update your email if you need to. So you all may note that you can see here these angle brackets where clearly the intent here is not to literally write this string angle bracket, your email close angle bracket. A convention is when something is a placeholder variable, you'll see this open angle bracket and close angle bracket. And go ahead to and update your name if your name isn't right. And once you've done that, again, run this config command to confirm that everything looks good.
It looks like mine's got 2 core editor lines. I had to put quotes around the code with the tac wait, but it's got a previous entry for just code on it. It may not mean anything because as long as it takes the last one, it'll be good.
Oh, did I give you all bad?
I think we did this with the pre-work install fest. I think we already added that in there. I'm not sure, but I don't think we had the -- wait.
Right. Oh, I may have given bad advice. Does this not just overwrite? Let's see here. Yeah,
Even when I put it in, I had to put quotes around the code -- wait, but it leaves the other line in there. It didn't overwrite the first line for some reason.
I'm so sorry about that, guys. I jumped to conclusions there about how this was behaving. Yeah, try. If you do it in quotes like that. Does that do it? If you just put it in quotes like this, does that overwrite correctly?
It took that, but it's got 2 code editor lines. I don't know if it's going to affect anything or not.
You could just vim the git config file, right? And then you
Yeah,
can just delete that
that's-
quarter line.
Yeah, at this point, I would just use VS Code and do like code / git config, and you can just modify it right in here. Yeah, that's probably the easier way to do it if you're seeing multiple lines. Let me stop sharing my screen for a moment.
In the git config, should those be the only things we have in there? For whatever reason, mine has 4 filters also added in the git config.
Go ahead and share your screen for a sec. I don't know exactly what those do or where those came from, but I don't think they will cause any problems, so don't worry about them for now.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks like something for something more advanced with Git that honestly I'm not sure of off the top of my head, but I don't think it'll be an issue.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Good question. So let me just do a sanity check. Does everyone now have their Git global configs in a good state?
What did you type in to get into that the git config sheet?
Oh, type code space / .git config to open up the git.git config file that lives in your home directory with VS Code. And then you should make sure that the editor is code space -- wait. And let me go ahead actually and share my screen and do that again, just to walk through that real quick. So that's actually a good one. So go ahead and code. You can just do this from whatever directory you want, since the tilde points right to the home directory. And you can do this in whatever shell or terminal you want, since code will just open up VS Code and type git config. And that should open up your git config file. If there's other stuff above this, don't worry about it. Make sure that your email is what you want it to be, that your name is right. Don't touch the default branch. And here it says editor. Note the space = space, put code space -- wait.
I have a quick question. I don't have default branch equals main. Should I add that?
Not right now. Don't worry about it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, not a big issue. You're not going to be creating new Git repos from the command line most of the time. You're going to be cloning them anyway. So they'll already have a default branch.
So I think I missed it. Could you explain what the editor equals code dash dash wait is for?
Yeah, totally. We'll get into it later. But with Git, when we change our code, we save those changes in something called a commit, and we can then write what's called a commit message to describe the changes that we made. By default, Git will use, I think it's Vim, to create that message, and Vim is frankly a little arcane. And so changing that default editor to VS Code means, and we'll see this tomorrow when we write commit messages, it will use VS Code, which is going to be more familiar and easier to use to write these messages.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Great question. Yeah, we're not digging that deep into Git today, so it is a little magical. Do go ahead and run this command brew install GH. GH is a GitHub client that is a relatively recent tool that lets us just do a lot of Git stuff on the command line more easily. The main thing we're going to use it for is actually authentication. We're actually not going to use a lot of its features, but we do want it for authentication. So please go ahead and run brew install GH. I thought I had it already installed, but it's actually updating it for me. Once this GitHub client program, GH, is installed, we should be able to find it with which just fine. I should be able to type GH and hit enter and get a bunch of stuff. And then run this command gh auth login. And I'm not going to do this now because I have my GitHub authentication set up with an SSH key. And if you know that your Git is already set up and authenticated against your GitHub, if you're able to push to a repo that you have and clone and stuff, don't worry about this. Or if you've already done this, don't worry about this. If this is new, then please do run this step. It should open up probably a browser and is going to kind of walk you through a couple steps just to authenticate the version of Git you have on your computer with your GitHub account in the cloud so that they can securely talk to each other. And just so I can track everyone's progress, can I get a quick show of hands for people who right now running that GH authenticate command? Okay, awesome. And how is that going?
I believe I already did it, but I don't, like previously before, I don't want to mess something up. So I don't want to go in there and try to do something.
Let's see if it messes stuff up. Because I already have my authentication set up. So yeah, if I already have this set up, so I'm gonna skip and kill this. We can always come back to this later. This one isn't a deal breaker if you're not sure, Rudder.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. What I would do is like, if you're able to clone our curriculum repo, then you are set up and authenticated. Like I would just go to curriculum. Clone it. If you don't remember which way you authenticated with HTTPS or SSH, we'll have to look at the Git config and figure that out. Remind me and let's look at that and get that set up later. And actually, let me see a show of hands from folks who are unsure if their GitHub is authenticated or who have not cloned the curriculum repo yet. Okay, do me a favor. Go ahead and in a directory, let's just do this in your home directory for simplicity. Or if you want to like make make a dir named code or projects, you can. But go ahead and run this command. For those of you who are not sure, see if that works. If it works and you're able to clone the repo, great. There are two ways to authenticate. With Git, one is with an SSH key, which is a little outside of scope. Well, actually, probably it's going to be with the, well, yeah, try this one as well. You might as well, to see if this works. I would honestly just run down the list. If you're not sure, trying all three of these. We can look at the actual config files later, but see if any of these work. And if none of them work, it means that you're not authenticated at all.
Are we just doing the curriculum? Are we cloning the curriculum one only?
We are cloning only the curriculum one as an easy way to test that your local Git is authenticated with the GitHub Cloud and able to clone anything at all. Correct. I mean, you could also probably run, there's probably a command like gh status. If you type gh status, that might tell you, well, this is, I'm sure there's a help command, log in, log out, probably GitHub auth refresh would do it, or actually gh auth status would do it. So actually, everyone just run this command and it'll tell you if you're logged in and authenticated or not. I apologize that it took me a minute to get there. As I said, I'm a little more used to using SSH keys. So please run this command, gh auth status. If it says you're logged in, you're set. If it says you're not logged in, please look at the curriculum repo and follow that other step to get authenticated. If you're not sure how to do that now, please come back to that later and I can help with that. Salvador, ping me later and let's double check on that one. So the last thing I think we want to do really, well, we have to set up aliases and we have to set up Postgres. So I think I'll walk through those and then maybe we'll take a break and I'll see if I can help the GitHub folks. And then we'll look at a little bit of VS Code extension stuff. How does that sound to people? Cool. So again, just to reiterate with the GitHub stuff, run this command. If it says you're logged in, great. If it says you're not logged in, run this command, gh auth login, and follow the steps that it prompts you for. And you may have to tackle this later if it's asking for an SSH key or something like that. And I can help folks with that later on. And then, okay, awesome. And then just cloning any repo. And this is a JavaScript helper library called Lodash that's quite popular. And you could just try this command and see if it works. And if that works, then you're good to go. And then just delete that Lodash directory once it clones. And again, when we break, anyone who is unsure of the status of their GitHub authentication, please hit me up here to remind me, and we'll take a look at it. Does that sound good, folks? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Cool.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question. So when I run the GH auth status, when it says get operation protocol, mine says HTTPS. Is it supposed to say that? I noticed yours said something else, something
That's
different.
okay. Yeah, that's a good question. There's different ways to set up GitHub to authenticate, and it's not a huge deal which one you're using as long as it's working.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. The SSH key stuff is great to learn about, but it's a little outside the scope of what we need right now. We'll probably come back to it later in the course around like deploying to AWS and stuff. Cool. So we are going to circle back to our ZHSRC config file for our shell config. And many of you may have added these aliases, but we are going to go ahead and add them. And I normally say don't copy and paste. I think the one exception to that rule is for config stuff, because a simple typo can cause a lot of issues, and most config files don't give us the same kind of protections that we get from like modern editors that give us like red squigglies and warnings, and where we get better error messages and stuff. So whenever you're kind of doing config stuff like this or something from a README like this, just always make sure you're doing exactly what it says, and that's actually a good time to copy and paste. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my ZSHRC config file in VS Code. I'm going to go down to the bottom of it, and I've already added these things, but if I didn't have them, I would just paste them in. I added a little comment here. I note that you add comments to a config file with the #, just like you do for Python file source code files, .py files. Don't worry if this doesn't look exactly the same. Like, this is something I added just for teaching purposes. You might have this in a different place. The important thing is to add these two alias lines. And then go ahead and save and close the ZSHRC file. And the easiest thing to do is probably just to open up a new terminal, a new shell session rather, and just do which Python, and it should say alias to Python 3, and which pip should say alias to Python 3. Just make sure that you do this in a new shell session, or that you run source.zshrc to reload the shell config for the shell that you're in. And I just want to pause here and see if folks have any questions. Okay, awesome. So we're digging deeper and
Adam?
deeper into this config stuff. Yes, sir. What's up?
Mine doesn't say that Python is an alias.
What does it say?
It just says, oh, now it did. I think I just had to restart VS Code.
Yep, you have to. It's not VS Code specifically, it's the shell session, which you could have hit that little plus symbol in the terminal to open up a new one, but closing and reopening VS Code will also create a new shell session.
I got it. Thank you.
For sure. And actually, this is a good lesson. Like anything that's a config file, it's pretty normal that when you change it, you have to like restart stuff. And you'll see this pop up later when we get into like Django and web frameworks. So that's just something to file away. When you mess with a config file, restart stuff. Cool. Awesome. So we're in the home stretch. We got the aliases. The big one now is Postgres. And let's actually look at what version of Postgres is out these days. So there's many newer versions of Postgres out right now. Postgres version 16, version 15. Let me actually see. I still have Postgres 14. So I think we're just going to run with Postgres 14 for now. We can always install a future version of Postgres later. Postgres is a database that we're going to learn about in a couple weeks. And there can be some differences depending on the different major versions, maybe in syntax or something else. So if you have a different version installed, that's okay. Don't worry about it. If you don't have something installed, then we should install version 14. I will say I actually, on a Mac, I actually like using this program, Postgres app, to install Postgres. This is actually maybe the only program I don't install with Homebrew. That said, I think for consistency's sake, we should stick with using Brew and kind of the way that we're doing here. So first off, can someone tell me how can I test if I have Postgres installed or not?
Postgres version.
Or you could do the Brew services restart Postgres, the version it'll run the server for that database.
I totally could. That does have the side effect of actually restarting Postgres. So it's good to know that we can do that. Is there a different Brew command I can use to see if Postgres is installed or not that doesn't have any side effects? I know we're seeing this all for the first time, so I apologize if that was a bit of a trick question, but Brew has a command called info. And in fact, I did not install Postgres or with Homebrew, so it is not installed for me, but for you, you should see something else. Yeah, I think Postgres -- version is the easiest and quickest way to see if it's installed. So let me see with the show of hands who has to install Postgres. Who does not have Postgres installed? Okay, a couple folks. Awesome. So
I have a question.
Yes, what's up?
You specifically mentioned that because the brew info Postgres meant you didn't have it installed via Homebrew, but I did Postgres space -- version, and it specifically said Postgres version 14.10 parentheses Homebrew. And then when I did brew info Postgres, it gave me the same error message. So I'm not sure that that's what that means.
That is a really good point. Let's do a quick internet search.
Yeah, I have the same
I
thing.
have the same thing.
Oh, thank you
Same.
guys. Let's see what's going on here. Maybe they have a naming thing. And indeed they
Someone in
do.
the chat, Tom said you need to add 14, I guess, the
Yeah.
version.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I apologize. Great catch. So try brew info PostgreSQL &14. And this would tell you if it's been installed with Homebrew or not. Yeah, and the Postgres -- version is the simplest and the best way to check. And that's why it's good too to learn like the most direct way to see if something's installed. Because I just made a really easy mistake to make with Homebrew. I just assumed, oh, the name is Postgres. And if you all hadn't caught my error, I could have spent like 45 minutes of my life trying to figure out what was going on there. So it's kind of like these little practices like this that make your life a lot easier. And I think the rule of thumb here is always try to get like as direct to the source as you can when you're confirming stuff about the state of your environment. And I think that Postgres -- version command is the way to go. So let me double check again and see like who needs to install Postgres. A couple folks. Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and run that command and install this sucker. Go ahead and run brew install Postgres, please. And then I believe once that's done, you'll want to run brew services restart Postgres. And can someone remind me, maybe one of the folks that did install it with Homebrew, did Homebrew like prompt us to run any other commands for getting Postgres configured? Because as I said, this is the one thing that I have installed with something else. But does this look about right? Okay, cool. Does everyone now have Postgres installed? Did that brew install step finish for you folks? Cool, awesome. So PSQL is another program that got installed with Postgres. And the services command, so services, or they're called like daemons, daemons. Okay. They're programs that run in the background and that start up when the operating system starts. So I think what we just did here, actually, and in fact, Brew start Postgres on OS start. Let's see if there is a command I need to run. I will follow up with you all if there's an additional Postgres command that we need to run to make sure that it runs in the background as a service. There may be off the top of my, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. So the way that Postgres works is it's got two different programs, the database itself, Postgres, and what's called a little client program, PSQL, that lets us talk to the database and run commands and stuff. So this PSQL program, and if you type which PSQL, it should show up, or PSQL -- version, it should show up. And does anyone not have PSQL installed? Can everyone confirm that they've got PSQL? Awesome. So PSQL is a little funky. The argument that we pass it is the name of the database that we want to connect to. Postgres is the database server that can have a bunch of different databases. Now, what's a little confusing is that by default, Postgres has a database named Postgres that it kind of uses to manage itself. So what I'm doing here is connecting to like a database named Postgres. And no such file or directory. I probably forgot a command, or our guide is wrong. I'm pretty sure, in fact, that this is not right and it needs to be updated. I do apologize about that.
That command just worked for me.
Oh, it did? Did it work for
Yeah.
everyone else, actually? Okay, awesome, even better. I must have like my system configured a little differently.
I had a quick question for you. So when I run the same command, it
Oh,
just
I know
prompts me
why.
for my password. But then I get an error. It says connection to server on socket fatal.
Yeah,
And
so
it says my
actually,
password is
my
wrong.
issue was I did not have Postgres running. I actually had turned it off before because I was testing something. So are you getting this error? No such file or directory?
No, I'm getting connection to server on socket and then fatal. And it also says my password is wrong.
And you're doing PSQL space Postgres?
Yeah.
And by the way, the way you quit PSQL is this. Okay. Then let me do a quick Google search. The background here is with PSQL and Postgres. You can have user accounts with Postgres. User accounts are connected to different databases. And there is almost definitely a default database and password and username. I'm not sure why you are getting prompted.
Can it be from my home directory?
It should not matter what directory it is because the PSQL, yeah, it's a great question though, because the PSQL program is talking to the Postgres program and they're not looking with anything.
Okay.
So let's try. It looks like the default username and password for Postgres are Postgres and password. Let's try Postgres login username password. This is a little more advanced, but actually we're going to have to do this in a moment anyway, I think. Try. Yeah, try this. PSQL dash uppercase U Postgres. And then if it prompts you for a password, try just typing password and see if that works.
So is PSQL dash uppercase U Postgres?
Yes, sir. I'm not even, yeah, exactly. Which I think actually might do the same thing. The important thing I think is maybe just try password as password for the default. Did that
Just
work for
all
you?
lowercase password?
Correct.
I got an error with that saying error connector to service server on socket role Postgres does not exist.
Role Postgres. What if you just do PSQL without the dash U, and then when it prompts you for a password, type password?
Yeah, mine's not even with the password, but it says it's for my user account. Like it says my name, but I know I'm putting in the right password because I was using it for the other ones too.
Yeah. You should. I'm not sure why you guys are getting prompted for passwords. This is the other way to do it. Like this is where we're eventually going. You know what? Let's come back to that one. And I apologize, guys. Remind me and let's come back to that, I think. You know, what might be useful, and this is kind of where we want to go actually, is let's actually try this, because this is actually what I want everyone to do. Because the other thing that PSQL does by default that's a little confusing is if you just type PSQL, it tries to log in with the username of your system user. Like you all can see that it says Adam C right here. And if I type this connection info command, it says I'm connected to a database named Adam C as user Adam C. So it does this all by default. So what I actually want to set up for us, and this is, I think, the more important thing to run. I'll share this link, but I'll also just share these commands explicitly. Let's use sudo as the super user. And go ahead and run this command and tell me if that works and what people get when you run it. Because we're using sudo as the super user, which I think like gives us a higher level of access to Postgres to create a new Postgres user. And this $ user is an environment variable for whatever your username is on your Mac. And that's actually what we want to make. And I would actually suggest everyone do this because it just makes using PSQL way easier. So could everyone please run this command and tell me what the response is when you run it?
I got
an unknown user.
Sudo unknown user Postgres and sudo error initializing audit plugins sudo errors _ audit.
So it's trying to log you into sudo as the Postgres user.
I see.
I went ahead and I think if you enter actual SU to enter the actual super user, you should be able to create your user that way instead of the sudo command.
Oh, that's a great idea. I actually don't know if I have SU even set up on my machine, to be honest.
Should be your root password, the same password you type in for sudo.
Yep, that's what I would have thought, but I'm actually running into an issue and I'm not.
Yeah, I keep getting sorry as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a flip I have a switch I have to flip somewhere. Okay, well, this is unfortunate. PSQL dash u Postgres. So, and just plain old PSQL space dash upper u Postgres fails for most people.
Yes. I have it installed, but whenever I run that, it throws an error.
Let's see here. Mac use su. The root user is disabled by default, therefore SU will not work. It's best to use sudo, right? It's interesting. I would have expected this sudo -u Postgres to work.
Yeah, because sudo tries to run as a different user, and I think that -u is going to move you into the Postgres user. But if your Postgres user doesn't have a password, then I don't remember. I know it does funny things, I think.
Yeah, let's try. Fatal role root does not exist. I apologize. Postgres is always a little funky. I thought we had this one sorted out. Let me just circle back to this with you folks, because I don't want to. I think I'm getting stuck and going down a rabbit hole, and we can probably get this sorted out at the end of the day. I might actually need a little help. Does anyone who actually got this set up and working, can you speak on what you did to get it working? Let's actually just, let's see if Homebrew has any advice about Postgres, because I think our docs need to get updated. What if folks just run like PSQL space Postgres, and then if you get prompted for a password, type in password? Does that work?
I was about to comment because when we originally did it, PSQL Postgres just by itself worked for me, but none of the other stuff you've been trying is I've been running into the same error issues with those that everyone else has.
Got it.
Same for me.
Okay, but PSQL Postgres, does that work for folks?
It
Yeah.
did work.
That works for me.
Okay, awesome. So everyone please run PSQL Postgres and get logged in, and then we'll get this sorted. I'm so sorry about this. Is this working for everyone now? And everyone's in PSQL? Awesome. Okay, hang with me just one moment.
Yeah, I'm still getting the error with PSQL Postgres.
Okay, so remind me later and I will circle back to you. So does everyone know your like Mac OS X username?
Like the one we log in with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would suggest is this command right here, where username is your Mac OS X username. You know, if it has spaces, you may need to use quotes. What we can also do is for those of you who are logged in, I'm surprised that the default Postgres does not let people log in with alter role hello with login. So let's try this. If you type /du, you should see a list of users. Where we want to end up is each of these should be a super user and pretty much have all the permissions like create role, create DB. And Postgres should be a super user. Is everyone seeing that?
I am.
Okay.
Postgres is not a super user for me.
Yeah, I just
I
have
don't have
my
Postgres either.
name on my Mac on there.
Okay. Let's alter these roles to become super users, especially if you have your name on your Mac. And I think it's going to look something like this. And again, thank you folks so much for being patient. I apologize about the confusion on this. The syntax is going to be alter role space with super user. So try, and don't worry about uppercase versus lowercase. That's just for readability and convention. You do need a semicolon at the end. So for whatever role names you see here, please add super user to both of them.
I don't have Postgres on my role of username at all. I just have my name.
That's okay. Go ahead and add super user to your name, and we'll add Postgres and we'll create the Postgres role in just a minute.
Okay, I already have super user, so just leave it as is.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
You know, as long as we're doing this too, we might as well alter role with login. And maybe that was the issue that I was running into before. Though I think super user should cover that really, and that's why I was so confused. So if you've got the super user, you should be okay. Please also now this command create database Adam C. Make a database with the same name as the user. If it says the database already exists, that's fine. That's good. That's what we want. Because pSQL by default logs you into like a database that has the same name as the user. And now for those of you who don't see Postgres, we are going to go ahead and take this command and slightly modify it. So if you don't have a Postgres user, this is what we're going to run. We're going to create a role, which is a user account named Postgres, and it's going to be a super user, and we're going to give them login. I'm not going to run this because I already have the Postgres one, but we're going to give them a password. Just make it password to make it super simple. So please go ahead and run that. And could someone tell me once they run that, what happens?
I just get another Postgres line with the equal and the pound sign.
Does it say like, oh, sorry, go
When
ahead.
I rerun
It doesn't throw an error at all.
I'm getting a syntax error with mine. Syntax error in your create.
The syntax. The syntax error probably means that there is a typo.
I copy and pasted your link from the chat.
Got it. Let's see if I have a typo in that. So this works for me, like just making up a user account. So try this. Make sure you get the semicolon. And was anyone able to run and create the Postgres role? And did it like say create role on the line below?
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
what happened when I did it.
Perfect. Yeah, that's how people says it succeeded, which is a little confusing. Go ahead now and please type create database Postgres, and it may already exist. Though this looks like, sorry, that was a copy paste typo on my end. Error database already exists is fine. That's a good thing.
Or when you create a new role name called Postgres, it just gives it the super user attribute. Does that supersede the create role, create DB, replication, bypass, RLS?
I don't know about the replication bypass RLS stuff. The super user attribute, it gives it because we told it to, where you can see create role with, and then I say super user right here. Replication bypass, RLS, all that stuff. Don't worry about that. I'm not even sure if we need it. Really, the important permissions are super user, create role, and create DB.
And then would you just alter the Postgres role to add create role and create DB if the only attribute is super user under Postgres?
Yes. If I think if you want, yeah, that's probably not the worst idea actually. So it should be like alter role Postgres with create DB, I think. It's probably like that, all one word. Yeah, that's probably a good call. So let's go ahead and I think super user can already do all that stuff. I'm about 90% sure, but they can't hurt just to add it. So in fact, go ahead and run these alter commands for both users.
On my list of rules for Postgres, it includes cannot log in as a role. Is that a problem?
I'm a little surprised that it says that. Try alter role Postgres with login password. And that was a typo, so forgive me. And I'll paste this once I have it corrected in the Zoom chat in a moment. See if you can't add a login with the password to your
That fixed
Postgres
that.
role.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great catch. Okay.
I'm still running into issues adding the create role and create DB permissions to Postgres.
I am too. It's like it's not taking it.
Go to include space, create role, all one
Yeah.
word. That was
Thank
my
you.
issue.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry for any confusion there. If you look at what I pasted in to the Zoom chat, I didn't include any spaces in the names of the role attributes. See if that does it.
Okay, so do the one you put in the chat at 247.
Yeah, I think all that should be perfectly safe to run.
Okay, yeah, that ended up working out. What were we supposed to do after we got the roles added?
Just make sure that the roles are there. If you do /du,
okay, mine are good.
You should see. Yeah. And now if it's I think /L lists all the databases. I have a ton, but you should see a database with your user account name, and you should see a database named Postgres. So /L or /L, excuse me. And if it's not, just create database Postgres and then create database with your username.
Are we needing to create everything to match the first line, like of our list of role attributes?
As long as for now, as long as the role has super user, I think that we're fine. Should be super user, create role, create DB. But we'll come back to this later if folks are unable to do this. Because I apologize that we didn't have this mapped out enough and we went down a bit of a rabbit hole. Go ahead and type /Q to quit Postgres. So the goal now should be just type pSQL and hit enter. And does that work? And then /Q quits. And does that work for people now? And if it prompts you for a password, hopefully you can just type password all lowercase, which if you added a password to that user. Is that working for folks?
Sorry, I missed it. What were we supposed to be typing in?
Yeah,
So
that's not working for me.
quit pSQL, so you're just on the command line, and just type pSQL and hit enter. Let me get a show of hands who that is not working for. Okay, we'll circle back to that one. And again, I apologize for the confusion for this. Let me get a show of hands of folks who that is working for. Okay, awesome. Again, I apologize. I got a little lost in the weeds there, so we'll come back to that one. If folks are doing okay, I do want to let's just quickly cover the VS Code stuff because that's super straightforward. And then we can take a break. And then I'll help out the Postgres folks who need it. How does that sound? Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you for your patience. Postgres is always a little funky. The backstory here is if you just type pSQL and hit enter, by default, it uses the username of your operating system user account and tries to log you into a database with that same name. So I want to set us up a Postgres role with that name and a database with that name. So then for the rest of the class, you just have to type pSQL and hit enter and you're good to go. So it might be a little frustration to get it set up, but then it'll be smooth sailing once it is. So
are we supposed to, with the way you did yours, you had like 4 different roles. Are we supposed to have those 4 different roles, or are we just supposed to have the Postgres in our name?
No, just Postgres in your name. It's a good question. Those other roles are just from experimenting and other stuff. And the roles are equivalent to
did do
user
that,
accounts.
Is there a way to delete them?
Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. There absolutely is, but it won't cause a problem. Just like having like an extra user account on your Mac isn't really gonna interfere with anything else. So let's go ahead and set up our VS Code for Python and a little bit for JavaScript. So we'll come back to the Postgres stuff. For now, go to VS Code, go to your home directory. If you haven't, I suggest making a directory named code for projects. If you don't want to do that right now, don't worry about it. And I'm going to close out all my other shell sessions just to do it. There's 2 ways to create files in VS Code. Really, there's a couple different ways. And actually, let me step back even a bit more, because I have a directory named code. And if I do code, let me go into the code directory so I can use a name of something better, like code Platoon curriculum. So if in VS Code, I do code to open up code Platoon curriculum, it opens up a new VS Code window and it opens up the VS Code Explorer to that directory. The terminal is also open to that directory, which is really useful. Another useful thing to know is in this Explorer here in VS Code, and let me go ahead and close these things out. If I right click on any file, there is an option open an integrated terminal that will open terminal in that directory where the file is. So if you're ever not sure if your terminal with VS Code is in the right space, find the file you want in the Explorer window, right click and do open an integrated terminal. The other way to open something in VS Code is you can just go ahead and open VS Code. And if you go to File, Open, you can, use the Finder on the Mac to pick the file that you want to open. And here, just again, for learning purposes, I'll just open, I have a directory named Whiskey. And so this is what VS Code calls the workspace. So just go ahead, have VS Code open. It doesn't matter where it is. And then in terms of creating files, there's two ways. I can right click in here and do new file. I can do on the command line, touch example.py to create a Python file. And then if I want to open it, I can just do code example.py and it will open it in a new tab in my VS Code window. And there's actually a third way to create a file, which is Command-Shift-P, create new file. And then if I just enter the file name like another file.py, VS Code will prompt me for where I want to put it, but it will look at the file extension and figure out where it is. So please create a Python file with .py at the end of it. And let's just put like a hello world statement in there and go ahead and save it. And VS Code may now prompt you to download the official Python extension. And VS Code extensions are really, really useful and important. They're super valuable parts of your editor. You can find them by clicking on this little sort of building blocks things here, or if you do Command-Shift-P, well, probably the building blocks thing is easier here, or there's also, I think it's in maybe the view window. I usually just go this way. So open up the extensions in VS Code and just go ahead and type Python. And there is the official Microsoft Python package. And if it's not installed, click install to install it. I actually don't want to uninstall it, so I'm good. So please make sure that this is installed. There's a whole bunch of Python related stuff that we don't have to worry about right now. It's worth, I think, installing a Python formatter. I would search for AutoPep8. There's a certain standard of how Python code should be written, how we should indent files, how variables should be named, when there should be comments. You can always disable this later if it provides too many red squigglies. But the nice thing about this too is, like, let's say I have some badly formatted Python code for whatever reason. I don't know. Like, let's just say I've done this. If I do Command-Shift-P and type format document, it will prompt me for a formatter. It'll prompt me to configure it. And you all, black is another popular Python formatter. You all should see AutoPep8, and you can select it and it will format it for you. So I highly, highly recommend this, because as you all are writing code, the more code you have, the more consistent you can make your code. So, like, you know, Francisco and I will be giving you all feedback, like if we see spaces where there shouldn't be, or like for instance, if you have a function definition, and you don't have a space between stuff, that is going to drive me nuts. And in fact, that's what all of my red squigglies are telling me right now. And if I format the document, it should have done some of that formatting for me. I think I need the closing brackets there. Let's try formatting the document now. So it did most of the formatting. I actually expected it to do a little more, but it's giving me this warning here, and I can actually, if I hover over this squiggly, this isn't an error, but this is like a syntax issue. We can configure this to, we should be able to configure this to fix this for us. I'm a little surprised that AutoPep8 is not, to be honest. But we can come back to that later. For now, I think just having AutoPep8 installed is the important thing. And actually, I'm probably losing my mind because I think I just needed those. Yeah, there we go. And now it's formatting as expected, which just goes to show how easy it is to miss stuff. I wish I could say I did that on purpose. I totally didn't. I just, we've been staring at a screen all day and it's easy to miss stuff. And this is actually why I think a tool like AutoPepe, a formatter tool, can help you, because I knew that the formatter should be doing that for me, but it wasn't. So I knew I had some sort of problem, and that red squiggly was there, and it helped me figure out the typo in my code. And then when I ran format document, it did it as expected, and this just makes it dramatically more readable. So again, please install AutoPepe and the official Microsoft Python plugin. And can I get a quick, let me get the my Zoom view back. I apologize, folks, I lost it for a sec. Can I get a quick hands up from anyone who does not have AutoPepe or does not have the official Python extension installed? Okay, awesome. Let's do a little bit of work for JavaScript as well. If under extensions you search for JavaScript, most of this stuff we don't need. By the way, for extensions, you can also filter, like I have my installed extensions. If you close installed, there will be a whole bunch of recommended extensions. I recommend just installing all the recommended extensions. There's a bookmarks extension I recommend installing. If you just type bookmarks and search for it, what it lets you do is over here in the bookmarks extension, I can run like a bookmarks command to toggle stuff. Like here, for example, Command-Shift-P, bookmarks toggle, bookmarks that file. And now over here, I've got that file and that specific line bookmarked. And this is not a big deal right now, but once your programs start getting bigger, so you have like maybe 10 or more files, I think the bookmarks can be really, really helpful. Just a couple other extensions worth installing. I have a whole bunch of stuff in here that we'll get to later that's not worth doing, but this one is for JavaScript, and it's for formatting JavaScript correctly according to a standard, which is called linting. So please search for ESLint, and you should find this official Microsoft ESLint installation, and go ahead and install this one as well, please. There's a couple other things with JavaScript that we might install later, and I'll circle back to it to make our lives easier, but this is a good start for now. And so the last thing I want to share is a super useful feature called Live Share with VS Code, where you can collaborate with each other. And so let me go ahead and hit Live Share, and you can see what happens. It's created an invitation link, and anyone and everyone who wants to, please go ahead and click on that link. And everyone can see my screen right now, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so go ahead, click on the link. It should prompt you to go through sort of like an invitation thingy, and I should get a pop-up, and then we all can start collaborating and working together on this file. And can someone maybe tell me when they've clicked on the link so I can know that if it's working or not? Perfect. I see a bunch of people joining. Yeah, feel free to write code, do whatever you want. You can also do stuff in the terminal. Just don't do anything in the terminal. If you want to like just put your cursor there, that's fine. But that is the one thing, obviously you wouldn't want to like go into the terminal and delete someone else's code. So this, especially for pair programming, and especially for working together, it's super fun. It used to be a little buggy, but as you can see, it's gotten pretty darn solid these days. And we can even add comments here, like, great job. Why did you, choose that approach? And you can accept read-only versus read-write. And if I can, let's see here. Awesome, I love it. Everyone's joining. There we go. Create a common thread. Yeah, so if folks want to comment and just play around with that in comments, please go ahead and do that. And is everyone able to like type and add stuff? Perfect. I love it. So, like we're still, Francisco and I are still getting used to this because we've gotten so used to like using Zoom for everything. But honestly, as you can see, like this is way better. So definitely feel more than free to remind me or Francisco at any point if we should be using live share during a lecture or class or mentoring or one-on-one. So I just think the more interactive stuff gets, the better.
Yeah, I don't know. How did you create that live share link?
Yeah, totally. It's super simple. It should be installed by default on VS Code because it's a Microsoft feature. If in extensions you search for live share, it should be installed for all of you, I think. If it's not, it will be a one-click install though. And as you can see, this is the official Microsoft one. Just like with NPM packages and pip modules, you want to look at the popularity. You know, this is 15 million downloads. This is the one we want. And once you've confirmed that you've got it installed, it's kind of hiding in the bottom status bar here. And there's a little like create new live share button right here. There's this other thing, go live. That's actually for like a live server. And that's something else. That's something a little different. That's for like hosting a HTML page on a little tiny like web server for like developer purposes. Yeah, this is awesome. I love it, folks.
You go over what the hotkeys were for formatting with PEP8 for just a normal Python file?
Oh yeah, totally. So the command palette is your best friend. There is probably some other hotkey, but what I always do is just Command Shift P, and I just start typing format, and it shows up the most recently used things and format document. And if it's a Python file, it'll figure out what it is. It may prompt you to choose like auto PEP8 to configure your formatter, but that shouldn't be too big a deal. By the way, there's some other really useful features like Command F searches through the whole file, right? I apologize, whoever wrote foo, but if you right click on a variable name or a function definition, so first of all, if we had multiple files and this was imported from somewhere else, go to definition or go to references would show us everywhere this is used. The really useful one is rename symbol, which has the hotkey of F2. And that would have, if that method was called in multiple places, it would have renamed it everywhere. So I actually highly recommend that because when you're renaming something that's in a bunch of places, it's so easy to make a typo. So that rename symbol feature is your friend. Again, right click on the thing you want to rename symbol, or hit F2. Command Shift F is a global find. And if you hit this little arrow, it will pop up with a replace option. And this is maybe a little more powerful because sometimes VS Code, you might have like variables and functions with similar names or the same name. So you might need to do it like manually one at a time. So search and replace is also really powerful, and your friend as well. So just getting to really, it takes a little extra effort in the beginning, but it pays off huge because you all will quickly find the biggest challenge with programming is humans aren't meant to be like super precise like computers. We always make mistakes because we're human. That's fine. What we do is we write software to balance that out. Make the machine do the work. Don't manually rename something in a bunch of places because we'll inevitably make a typo. Use search and replace or the rename symbol feature. Like make the machine do the work. Okay, this is awesome, folks. but I think we have to break because I know this has been a long session. So that we can take a break, so that I can check in with Francisco, and also so that I can circle back and help the Postgres folks. But before we break, I just want to check in, see what questions folks have, and see what's on people's minds.
I got a question back with when we were talking about Git. Just, I don't know if this is an issue that needs addressed, but when I did the GH auth status, just to make sure that I was actually logged into GitHub, I was, but I still ran into error message when I tried to copy the curriculum, which that was the method you wanted to test if we were connected.
To clone it.
Yeah.
Was anyone able to successfully clone the curriculum repo to make sure I'm not making a bad assumption about its permissions level?
I was able to use the second command that you put in
The GH clone?
yes.
Yeah. Did you try it with the GH clone or Git clone when it didn't work for you?
Off the top of my head, I think Git clone, but
yeah, try GH clone. I may have led you down a wrong path there. If GH clone doesn't work, let me know.
All right, thank you.
Totally. So I know this was a long session today, and thank you all for being patient. How are people feeling? Are we getting like a little excited about kind of like learning our tools and our workbench? Okay, awesome. This is a lot of stuff. It's just going to keep adding up. I highly recommend making a notes file or a physical paper notebook. Like, your job is not to keep all this stuff in your head. Your job is to like make cheat sheets and share them with each other and write down notes. And honestly, that's what I do when I'm working professionally. Like, the challenge with this course is you have to context switch all the time, jump from one thing to another. When programmers are working professionally, we hate context switching because it's difficult. And the way to be really productive is when you get to work on the same kind of thing for a couple days. You get to really get in the zone. You get the code in your head. You get the problem in your head. It takes a little time to ramp up, but then your productivity really snowballs. When we get to the personal project, where you'll have about 2 weeks towards the end of the course, and the group project, you all will get to experience this. During the class, because we are covering so much ground, it's going to be tougher. So there will be a lot of context switching, and I highly recommend making notes and putting notes in a notebook. And really like leaning hard into VS Code as much as you can, and all the keyboard shortcuts and features, because it will save time and effort and mistakes. And you all will also learn the big thing is like workflow and not programming tired, because the biggest enemy is bugs and errors, and it's almost always better to slow down to speed up. Because if I write like 100 lines of code and I haven't run it, and then I have a bunch of bugs, I have to spend hours debugging. But if I do it like a couple lines at a time and run it, and I know it works, then I'm good. Okay, awesome. Let me go ahead and pause the recording.